My basic presentation, Bitcoin is the solution to money printing. I think one thing that I like to kind of frame for people first and at the start is that oftentimes people look at Bitcoin and it either doesn't make sense or they think about it as a solution in search of a problem. It is not a solution in search of a problem. It is, very intentionally a solution for the problem of printing money. And the first thing that people have to accept, and most people I think understand this intuitively, but recognizing that that statement is in fact a problem, that the printing of money is a problem. It's a problem for all of us as individuals. It's a problem for us as business owners. It's a problem for us as a community, as a state, country. And I'm going to talk about why. But the printing of money is a problem. Central banks in the United States, all over the world, they're going to have to print ever more money, and that can't go on forever. I think the common sense side of people understand that both something's wrong and that it can't last forever. Ultimately, kind of on the front end of printing money, it causes our purchasing power to degrade, but it's not as simple as money just getting a little less valuable over time. Over time, the monetary function breaks down and eventually it fails completely. The solution is Bitcoin. And if I simplify it for people, it is this. Like if there's one idea, and there'll be two principles that I ask you to take away, one idea, and the one idea is that all value derives from the fact that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. That its fixed supply is the thing of fundamental value. And that what it ultimately represents is a form of money that can't be printed. So if the problem is printing of money by central banks is a problem, Bitcoin is a very intentional solution to solve that problem. When it was created in 2009, it was created for that express purpose of recognizing that this specific thing is a problem, and a form of money that can't be printed would be the solution to that, logically. It is very binary. And again, this centers around this same point, one point that I want you to take away. If Bitcoin credibly enforces its fixed supply of 21 million, then it will emerge as the global reserve currency, will be adopted by all businesses, and all businesses will accept Bitcoin, and all goods will be priced in Bitcoin. That's a big statement, but I say it that way to focus you guys in on this idea that if Bitcoin can't, because the reverse is also true, if it can't credibly enforce its fixed supply, then it won't be adopted as money. Everything really focuses on that binary outcome. It is a finite surface area. I personally developed high degrees of conviction around why and how that happens. I can't get you all there today, but I can kind of lay out the framework to think about it today, and then you guys can go deeper. But the second principle that's wrapped up in this idea, the first one is logical, that people would rather have a form of money that can't be printed over one that can. The second one that's less intuitive for people is that the world converges on one form of money, or more simplistically, each local economy converges on one form of money, and that happens for very fundamental reasons. It's not a coincidence that we all take dollars here in Austin, or for your business that you generally only take one form of money, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Right side of the page, the problem I highlight is that in the US alone, money supply has grown by 8 to 9 times. This is base money. This is what the Federal Reserve has created out of thin air since 2009. Okay, getting into the meat of the presentation though. Money printing is the source of inflation. Inflation is a problem for businesses, which I'll talk about in a second. I think you guys all know this if you run businesses, but I'll talk about some of the specifics. Cumulative CPI is 20% since 2020. That's what's causing havoc in the economy, in my opinion. Real inflation is higher, and critically, prices do not change ratably. So when the Fed creates money, it's not like everything just got 10% more. Prices change unpredictably, and they don't change ratably. The way that money distributes and who gets it and how it is affected, think about if all relative value is constantly changing, and if there were a world where that wouldn't necessarily be the case. There's another fundamental thing, which is printing money does not create anything. And what I have on this slide is the amount of money and the changes indexed. That dotted line probably looks to you like it's the y-axis. What it actually is the U.S. labor force. And this is just kind of keying in for you that this is indexing both the labor force and the amount of money back to 2008. So thinking about it as first the money supply increased by 5x, and ultimately it's increased by, and then on this chart or by this point by 7x. Ultimately it's increased by 8 to 9x, but the labor force has only increased by 6%. What functionally happens is there's just more money sloshing around competing for functionally the same resources. You could think about that as, if the amount of office space in Austin increased by 20%, but the money supply is increased by 7x, you have massive amounts of money chasing a relatively fixed amount of resources, and costs and inputs change unpredictably. So if I think about a business, your balance sheet's degrading. You're sitting there with cash in your balance sheet, and your working capital every single day is engineered to lose value. Your input costs are changing. You're having to constantly reevaluate your pricing on your revenue side. Am I charging enough? Effectively, your business model is constantly changing because of the reason that the money is being printed, not because some competitor has come in necessarily, and you're constantly having to evaluate for yourself what of these changes, whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously, are a function of the money being printed versus fundamental economic realities of my particular business changing and the competitive dynamic of that. You end up spending a lot more time than you otherwise would reinventing your business model than just executing in operations. And the way I kind of really frame this is that it is akin to not just moving the goalposts, this idea of moving money, like creating money and destroying money. It's like building the economy on a 1980s style waterbed and then moving the goalposts. The whole foundation changes, and it distorts all senses of relative value for business owners and operators. This is a slide or image that I try to help articulate. Think about if you sell something for dollars and the dollar value is being debased. Essentially what happens over time for those dollars that you get today is it's creating a deficit. And there is this thing that is really fundamental that this can't go on forever. Money doesn't grow on trees, but ultimately humans cannot trade their finitely scarce time for something that is created out of thin air. The dollar degrades because the Fed can hit a button and create 5 trillion more with no cost. And ultimately what happens is the value of the money trends towards its marginal cost to produce. And if the marginal cost to produce $1 is 0, money degrades over time, but ultimately becomes worth nothing. And that's just keying in on this idea that it can't go on forever. I think the people who print money think that it can, but in the real world there are consequences. And an idea that I think about is like if it costs a certain amount of time and energy to pull a barrel of oil out of the ground, imagine someone buying that barrel for 0 cost. That's essentially what's happening when they print money. And this is the answer. Bitcoin's fixed supply. And I think a lot of people look at Bitcoin and they say, it has no intrinsic value. It could be gone tomorrow. The thing that is fundamentally valuable about Bitcoin is its fixed supply. And that is the thing that is worth protecting. It's the thing that the Bitcoin miners do to secure. It's the thing that is of value to all of us. If there could exist a form of money that didn't and couldn't be printed, that would be far more optimal than one that can be easily printed. This is what I'm showing here is the amount of Bitcoin issued every year. So going back to 2012, 2.6 million Bitcoin were issued. Then the next year, 1.6 million, 1.5, 1.4, 1 million. Now in this year, only approximately 160,000 Bitcoin will be issued. And functionally what happens is every 4 years, the rate of issuance gets cut in half. That doesn't happen because a group of people get into a room and agree on it. It happens based on hard economic facts that can't be cheated, that can't be undermined. If it could be, Bitcoin wouldn't be of value. And over time, what you see on this curve is this basically asymptotic fixed 21 million supply happening as every 4 years the rate of issuance getting cut in half. That event is happening this April. So in April, the rate of issuance when we get to block technically 840,000, Bitcoin being issued every 10 minutes of 6.25 will be cut to 3.125. That is how Bitcoin enforces its fixed supply of 21 million. Every 4 years, rate of issuance cuts in half until a point where there's no more Bitcoin to be issued and everyone just has to trade the existing Bitcoin. What that represents is an inflation rate of about 0.8%, trending to zero. The thing about this, again, anchoring to the context of is money that can't be printed. It is predictable, it is known, it is verifiable. Everyone can verify it. It is finite in supply. It's not susceptible to change critically. It's not based on trust. No one's in control. There's no CEO of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's used all over the world. And everyone can trust it because no one has to be trusted. And it's the fixed supply that drives adoption. And it's what allows Bitcoin to store purchasing power over time because it's finite and it can't be debased. Now, when you look at this relative to other currencies, this is a Sesame Street exercise. So it's very basic, but it is one of these things is not like the others. And what I'm demonstrating here is the annual rate of change in the currency supply. And I've got Bitcoin on the left and the rate of change, the rate of increase in supply constantly trending down and being very consistent and predictable. Then to the right, you have the dollar, the euro, and the yen. And you can see both large increases and then decreases and then large increases. What this here, the third column from the right for the dollar, is that the Fed created 80% new dollars in 2020. The ECB in Europe created about 45% more euros just in 1 year. The Bank of Japan was the best of them, and it was 22%. So think about it as massive increases of money, unpredictable, and thinking about it as on which foundation would you want to build a business? Form of money that can't be altered, that can't be printed, even if it's hard to grasp, or one when you're looking at these three clown shows of, increasing money supply, decreasing money supply, like that's the 1980s waterbed foundation. This is the slide that helps people understand. I talk about printing of money is a problem. Bitcoin's the solution to it because of its fixed supply. This is why the Fed always has to keep printing money. It has to do with the degree of system leverage in the financial system and the relative amount of debt to dollars. So what I'm demonstrating here is in 2007, there was only about $900 billion in actual existence, and there was 52 trillion of debt. That's what the financial crisis was about. They printed a lot of money to be able to sustain existing debt levels. So they printed about 3.6 trillion post-crisis. That caused a credit system that was over-leveraged, unsustainable, to grow by 20 trillion. That's what required them to put more money in the system in 2020. They printed about 4 to 5 trillion more dollars, and it again induced an even greater expansion of the credit system. So when you think about it, where we are today, 96 trillion of dollar-denominated debt, very vanilla, very basic, only the things you would consider debt, not unfunded pension liabilities, not derivatives, just you owe X amount by this date, fixed maturity, fixed liability, 96 trillion to only $8 trillion in the system. Every dollar is essentially still lent out 12 times over, and that degree of leverage is what will dictate sometime. It's an inevitability that they will have to print more money. That's what helped me understand Bitcoin. This is the actual Fed balance sheet functionally of how they've increased money, and it's my what I call my fool me once, shame on you, fool me 4 times, shame on me. If QE worked, why do they always have to do another round, right? And so I show QE1 right after the crisis, QE2, QE3, QE 2020, which was its largest one ever, and just this idea that QE is forever. The money printing has to keep happening because of the way the money printing works. It induces more leverage. It necessitates that they print money. And while we can't prevent them from printing dollars, we can opt into a system of money that they can't print. And that is a benefit to all individuals, all families, all businesses, all communities that adopt it. The 2 key principles, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions for 10 minutes, is this is why the world is adopting Bitcoin. If you try to evaluate everything that's happening in the quote crypto space, and that's one thing I didn't mention at the top, but I'll take the opportunity now. When I talk about Bitcoin, it's only Bitcoin. I view all other quote crypto, not to be insulting, but I view it as snake oil. And it's a bunch of people trying to print money, create their own money. Ultimately, we only need one form of money. There is an idea of an optimal form of money, and it is simply the one that can't be printed. So if the one idea I ask you guys to take away is all value derives from the fact that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin enforces that fixed supply, which Phil is going to talk about in a second, that's the magic. You know, that's the harder thing to get your head around, but the easier thing is to understand the why. That's the how. And if that is credibly enforced, if there is a form of money that we could all opt into that has a fixed supply, and then the second principle, if money naturally converges to one because it's solving this problem of trade, I have to have the form of money that you're willing to accept to buy your goods and services, and then you have to have this reasonable expectation that your money will be accepted by the next person. That identical problem extends out to all 8 billion people in the world. So if the fixed supply is credibly enforced, and if money converges to one, everybody just need to find the best one form of money. And again, if Bitcoin's credibly enforced, then everyone in the world will adopt it as money. This is the idea. You can't fix a broken money with anything other than a better form of money. You can't hedge a bad form of money. You got a broke roof, get a better, fix the roof. You have a broke car, get a new car. If you have a broke money, you got to get a better form of money, or you're going to be out. The way I see the future on a Bitcoin standard, cash will hold value for businesses. You won't have to be managing treasury and credit instruments if you have that problem. Bitcoin transactions from volatile to stable. Marty is going to talk about volatility and squaring volatility of Bitcoin with inflation. All goods will be priced in Bitcoin. Running businesses will still be hard, but it will be marginally made easier for the reason that your money is storing your value rather than constantly being engineered to be degraded. This last image I have is this idea that Bitcoin is anti-fragile. Everything changes around Bitcoin. The thing that is stable that we can all rely on is its fixed supply. And when the Bitcoin market, quote, crashes, no one's coming to save anybody. Moral hazards eliminated. The slide that I showed before doesn't get altered. 21 million continues to operate and be affected regardless of what's happening around it. And as the market absorbs volatility or as stressors happen, Bitcoin actually emerges stronger. People learn, they realize that they have to be personally accountable. They have to account for its volatility, which Marty will talk about. They also have to be personally accountable about how they store it. And if someone hacks your exchange account or you lose your Bitcoin, nobody else is affected. You've made the error and Bitcoin goes on. No one's bailing you out. Maximally accountable. The fiat system's the opposite. As they print more money, that system gets more fragile progressively. And that's why it becomes increasingly a problem. So the fixed supply is the key. It is binary. It is a finite surface area. It's not an IQ test. It is common sense. And we've got a lot of resources right here in Austin to help people. And to point you to more resources, we'll have 2 more presentations on the fundamentals from here. But I'll take maybe 5 minutes of questions if people have them.